Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning we'll be in Matthew chapter 8, verses 1 through 17. After Jesus came down from the mountain, large crowds followed him, and a leper approached and bowed low before him, saying, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." He stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, "I am willing, be clean." Immediately his leprosy was cleansed. Then Jesus said to him, "See that you do not speak to anyone, but go, show yourself to a priest, and bring the offering that Moses commanded, as a testimony to them." When he entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him asking for help. "Lord, my servant is lying at home, paralyzed in terrible anguish." Jesus said to him, "I will come and heal him." But the centurion replied, "Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Instead, just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I too am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I say to this one, 'Go,' and he goes, and to another, 'Come,' and he comes, and to my slave, 'Do this,' and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he was amazed, and said to those who followed him, "I tell you the truth, I have not found such faith in anyone in Israel. I tell you, many will come from the east and west to share the banquet with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the sons of the kingdom will be thrown out into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Then Jesus said to the centurion, "Go, just as you believed, it will be done for you." And the servant was healed at that hour. Now, when Jesus entered Peter's house, he saw his mother-in-law lying down, sick with a fever. He touched her hand, and the fever left her. Then she got up and began to serve them. When it was evening, many demon-possessed people were brought to him. He drove out the spirits with a word, and healed all who were sick. In this way, what was spoken by Isaiah the prophet was fulfilled. He took our weaknesses and carried our diseases. Yeah. Um, so you have Jesus healing a leper and healing the centurion's servant from afar. Jesus healing Peter's mother-in-law, and Jesus healing many that are demon-possessed. So, lots of healing and dealing with the suffering of men. One thing that's really interesting with the leprosy story in particular is that he reaches out his hand to touch the leper, and the Old Testament Levitical law was very clear that those who were leprous were supposed to remain outside of the camp and not touch anyone. And if they were to touch someone, then the uncleanness that was on them would be transferred to another person. But in the case of Jesus, rather than uncleanness being transferred to him, cleanness is transferred from Jesus to this man. So, yeah, which is different from the temple articles, which would grow unclean if something unclean touched them. This is the first instance of holiness spreading. Yeah. And when Jesus cleanses the leper, he says to him, "See to it that you do not speak to anyone, but go, show yourself to a priest, and bring the offering that Moses commanded as a testimony to them." So, as part of being cleansed from leprosy, there was a specific sacrifice that was prescribed for the one who had been suffering from leprosy, but then had been cleansed from it. And it involved 2 birds, piece of cedar, and piece of scarlet string, some water, and a bowl, where one bird was to be sacrificed and its blood mixed with the water, and the live bird was to be dunked in it and released, essentially. Showing this sort of propitiation for sins that Jesus was coming to do, and as kind of a foreshadowing to the priests that this that Jesus was coming to save people from their sins, essentially. From Guzik here. Oh, also, the bit with the centurion having such great faith that he said essentially Jesus didn't even have to be in the same building with him to heal his servant. And Jesus was like, "You're right." And as you've believed, it will be done for you, type thing. So that's really cool. Was listening to C.S. Lewis's God in the Docks the other day, and he was talking about miracles in particular. And when Jesus talks about, when the Pharisees come to Jesus and say, "Why are you breaking the Sabbath?" type thing, and he says that my Father's been working up until this day, and so have I, type thing. Yeah, God, and the idea was that God has been active in holding all of creation together in what he did with like healing a person of leprosy. This act of pouring out his power, rejuvenating a person, he does in small ways every day of rejuvenating all of our bodies so that we can be healed of cuts and bruises and things of that nature. In the same way that he turned water to wine, in the same way every day he's taking water and bringing it through a grape plant and turning it into a fruit and turning that into wine type thing. So it's the same sort of actions that God is taking every day. My Father was working to this point, and I am working. When Jesus came down from the mountain, great multitudes followed him. The miracles of Jesus attracted much attention, but so did his teaching ministry. Matthew demonstrated this by his mention of the great multitudes that followed him after coming down from the Mount of Beatitudes. When we compare the events of this chapter with the record of Mark or Luke, we find different order and chronology. Carson, along with others, claims that Matthew arranged his material here according to topics and themes, not according to chronology. Matthew does not purport to follow anything other than a topical arrangement, and most of his time indicators are very loose. Yeah, and I mean, that checks out with Matthew being more in the line of Jewish writers prior to him, and having a more Jewish approach to Scripture, in that oftentimes there wasn't so much a concern for chronology as there was topical arrangement. We remember an important foundational verse for Matthew's Gospel. Now Jesus went about all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing all kinds of sicknesses and diseases among the people. Matthew went on to tell us about the teaching ministry of Jesus. Now he tells us more about the healing ministry of Jesus and how his works confirmed his words. Yeah. Leprosy in the ancient world was a terrible destructive disease, and still is in some parts of the world. Leprosy might begin with a loss of all sensation in some parts of the body. The nerve trunks are affected, the muscles waste away, the tendons contract until the hands are like claws. There follows ulceration of the hands and feet. Then comes the progressive loss of fingers and toes, until in the end a whole hand or a whole foot may drop off. The duration of that kind of leprosy is anything from 20 to 30 years. It is a kind of terrible progressive death in which a man dies by inches. And according to Jewish laws and customs, one had to keep 6 feet from a leper. If the wind was blowing towards a person from a leper, they had to keep 150 feet away. The only thing more defiling than contact with a leper was contact with a dead body. In the Middle Ages, if a man became a leper, the priest donned his stole and took his crucifix and brought the man into the church and read the burial service over him. For all human purposes, the man was dead. For all these reasons, the condition of leprosy is a model of sin and its effects. It is a contagious, debilitating disease that corrupts its victim and makes him essentially dead while alive. And it followed that almost universally, society and religious people scorned lepers. Rabbis especially despised lepers and saw them as people under the special judgment of God, deserving no pity or mercy. In Jesus' time, rabbis sometimes boasted about how badly they treated lepers. One bragged that he refused to buy even an egg on a street where he saw a leper. Another boasted that he threw rocks at lepers upon seeing them. Nevertheless, the leper came to Jesus by himself, and despite many discouragements. Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. The leper sought more than healing. He wanted cleansing, not only from the leprosy, but also from all its terrible effects on his life and his soul. In addition, this is the first place in the Gospel where Jesus is called Lord. This title was particularly meaningful in light of the fact that the word Lord was used to translate the Hebrew word Yahweh, and Matthew wrote his Gospel to those who would be familiar with the Jewish context of that word. Yeah, and Jesus does not deny this title, but goes on to say, I am willing, be cleansed. Jesus put out his hand and touched him. This was a bold and compassionate touch from Jesus. The idea is that the leper kept his distance from Jesus, but he put out his hand and touched him. It was against the ceremonial law to touch a leper, which made the touch all the more meaningful to the afflicted man. Of course, as soon as Jesus touched him, he was no longer a leper. Yeah, I wonder how... I can't imagine that the cleansing from leprosy sacrifice God offered that often. But here he did. And then a centurion came to Jesus. The centurion was obviously a Gentile, because the centurion was an officer in the Roman army. Most every Jew under Roman occupation felt a reason to hate the centurion, yet he came to a Jewish teacher for help. Significantly, he came not for a selfish reason, but on behalf of his servant. This centurion had an unusual attitude toward his slave. Under Roman law, a master had the right to kill his slave, and it was expected that he would do so if the slave became ill or injured to the point where he could no longer work. Pleading with him. This shows that the centurion did not make a casual request. Matthew describes him as pleading with Jesus on behalf of his servant. He seeks a cure, but does not prescribe to the Lord how or where he shall work it. In fact, he does not put his request into words, but pleads the case and lets the sorrow speak. I will come and heal him. Jesus did not hesitate to go to the centurion's house. And we half wish the centurion would have allowed him. It was completely against Jewish custom for a Jew to enter a Gentile's house, yet it was not against God's law. Yeah. There was significant rabbinical custom at the time that was like, can't mix with Gentiles because they're unclean type thing. But only speak a word, and my servant will be healed. The centurion fully understood that Jesus' healing power was not some sort of magic trick that required the magician's presence. Instead, he knew Jesus had true authority and could command things to be done and completed outside his immediate presence. Yeah. In him we move and breathe and have our being. But the sons of the kingdom will be cast out into the outer darkness. As well, Jesus reminded his Jewish listeners that just as the Gentiles' racial identity was no automatic barrier to the kingdom, their racial identity was no guarantee of the kingdom. Though Jews were sons of the kingdom, they might end up in hell. Yeah. Yeah. When evening had come, they brought to him many who were demon-possessed, and he cast out the spirits with a word, and healed all who were sick, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, He himself took our infirmities and bore our sicknesses. Yeah, good stuff. Carrying on, Psalm chapter 9, verses 13 through 20. Talking about the cry of those who needed help. When they prayed, Have mercy on me, Lord. See how I am oppressed by those who hate me. O one who can snatch me away from the gates of death. Then I will tell about all your praiseworthy acts. In the gates of daughter Zion I will rejoice because of your deliverance. The nations fell into the pit they had made. Their feet were caught in the net they had hidden. The Lord revealed himself. He accomplished justice. The wicked were ensnared by their own actions. The wicked are turned back and sent to Sheol. This is the destiny of all the nations that ignore God. For the needy are not permanently ignored. The hopes of the oppressed are not forever dashed. Rise up, Lord. Don't let men be defiant. May the nations be judged in your presence. Terrify them, Lord. Let the nations know they are mere mortals. Yeah, and I think people can get an inflated view of their lives, thinking that they'll live forever here on this earth, when in reality, they're mortal as well as the rest of us. And rather than use their time to dominate people and make the helpless suffer, they should consider their state. That there will be judgment, ultimately. And that sin that they harbor here on earth will ultimately separate them from a righteous God, righteous, just God. So, that I may tell of all your praise. David wanted God to rescue him so that he could give God all the more praise and all the more passionately to rejoice in God's salvation. For the needy shall not always be forgotten. David expresses a beautiful contrast here. The wicked try to forget God, yet the needy and poor, here describing the godly who are oppressed by God's enemies, are not forgotten. Shall not always be forgotten reminds us that from the perception of the needy and poor, they may for a time feel forgotten, yet the good God promises that they will not always feel this way, and their expectation will not forever be disappointed. Yeah. And finally here, Proverbs chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. My child, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments, for they will provide a long and full life, and they will add well-being to you. Do not let truth and mercy leave you. Bind them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart. Then you will find favor and good understanding in the sight of God and people. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not rely on your own understanding. Acknowledge him in all your ways, and he will make your paths straight. Yeah. That verse 5 there, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not rely on your own understanding, is pretty much the antithesis of our modern age here, where it's your heart that's ultimately your guide in life, and whatever your heart says and whatever feels good, that's what you should do. But what does it say? Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not rely on your own understanding. And I mean, from even an analysis here, our heart can often be deceptive. That is, we only have a limited venue from which we can observe reality with our 2 eyes, our 2 ears, and our senses, and the rest of our senses. And that less than omniscience can oftentimes lead us to a skewed perception of reality. That is, we may misinterpret what somebody says as being hostile or as being good, although it was flattery. And that judgment that we offer there can be incorrect simply because of the lack of omniscience that we have. We don't have a full understanding of all situations, let alone the ones that we're a part of. That's why it's good to, that's one of the reasons why it's good to give way to the Lord and his ways. Other reasons include that our heart is sinful, desiring to go away from the Lord innately. Let not mercy and truth forsake you. Solomon wisely told his son to keep God's loyal love and truth close. They should be so close that it would be as if they were a necklace on him at all times. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. If trust in God is to be true, it must be complete. To put half our trust in God and half our trust in self or something else is really failure to trust the Lord at all. We should endeavor to give God all our conscious trust. Yeah. Trusting God with all our heart means to decide to put away our own understanding and instead choose to trust God and his understanding, especially as declared in his word. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you have a great day.